Okie dokie. Let me go ahead and explain the difference between checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. It's really important that you understand this moving forward, because as you start building applications, you need to distinguish between one versus the other. And also when you build your own exceptions, you need to decide whether it's going to be a checked or unchecked exception. So let's begin with unchecked exceptions, i.e. runtime exception. So here, runtime exception. So anything which is a subclass of a runtime exception is a runtime exception, i.e. unchecked exception. So to explain this, let's go back to IntelliJ. And in here, if I remove the try catch, so I'm going to remove basically try and catch from here. So we've learned about try and catch. But to explain runtime exceptions, let me just remove that. So in here, if I format things just like that, so have a look. We have this parse int in here, and we have this for loop. Now you've seen that if I say equal, so greater or equal to 0, this will fail. Let me just run this and have a look. So this actually ran, so we have some results in here, so it was running, and then at some point it did actually blow up. So as the value here was 0, then we got this exception. So this is actually a runtime exception. Why is it a runtime exception? Well, let me go to the official documentation so that you can see. So in here, if I search for runtime exception, so runtime, and we should see runtime exception in here from Java Lang. Click on that, and you can see that this is part of the hierarchy that I've showed you before, and we've got a bunch of these, right? So you've seen these. Now, what is this? So it says runtime exception is the superclass of those exceptions that can be thrown during the normal operation of the Java virtual machine. Runtime exception and its subclasses are unchecked exceptions. Unchecked exceptions do not need to be declared in a method or constructor's throw if they can be thrown by the execution of a method or constructor and propagate outside the method or constructor boundary. So basically, in a nutshell, what is this? What it's saying is that this exception can be thrown during the normal operation of the Java virtual machine, i.e. your application. So if I go back to IntelliJ, in here, have a look. So this is exactly what happened, right? So you can see that the application was running perfectly fine. And then at some point, it did throw an exception. So this exception did occur during the normal execution of our application. So this is a runtime exception or unchecked exception. If I change this to equal, or actually let me just remove equal here, and if I remove this from here and just put it right here, so I want to show you that. So if I run this, you can see that we have everything working fine, 10 in here, and then 1. So 1 is when we convert this string right here into a number. Now if I put an X in here, let's just run this. You can see that the application did run, it was running fine, and then during the execution of the program, an exception was thrown, which was number format exception. So this exception here, if I click on it and collapse this, you can see thrown to indicate that the application has attempted to convert a string to one of the numeric types, but that string does not have the appropriate format. So this is when this exception is thrown. And have a look in here, extends illegal argument exception. So illegal argument exception, if I click on it, extends also runtime exception. And you can see that basically thrown to indicate that a method has been passed an illegal or inappropriate argument. Extends runtime exception. Click on runtime exception. And this is basically runtime exception, extends exception. So this is the diagram that you've just seen. And here, runtime exception is the superclass of those exceptions that can be thrown during the normal operation of the Java virtual machine. And this is what you saw on the documentation. So if you don't want to go to the documentation, you could just basically read from here, which is kind of nice. So this is unchecked exceptions. Now, in order for this to fully make sense, you need to learn about checked exceptions.